When a family has a disagreement, who gets the final say over a child's life? A parent? A grandparent? A court? Well, we're going to dive into a landmark Supreme Court case, Troxell versus Granville, that tackles that exact, deeply personal question. It's a story that really gets to the very heart of what it means to be a parent.
So this is the big question, right? At its core, this is what Troxell versus Granville is all about. It's a case that began as a private, painful family dispute and spiraled all the way up to the Supreme Court, forcing the justices to draw a line in the sand about how far the government can interfere in family life.
So here's how we're going to break this down. Think of it like an hourglass. We're going to start wide with a big constitutional idea, then narrow it way down to the specifics of this one family story, and then zoom back out to see what it all means for the rest of us today.
Okay, before we even meet the family, we have to get our heads around the legal principle at the very center of this whole thing. I mean, where does this idea of parental rights even come from in the first place?
It all goes back to the 14th Amendment. The right for parents to raise their kids isn't some newfangled idea. It's deeply, deeply rooted in the Constitution's promise of personal liberty. In fact, the Supreme Court itself has called it perhaps the oldest of all our fundamental freedoms.
And look, the Troxell case didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It stands on the shoulders of nearly a century of other court decisions that have consistently said, yes, parents have a fundamental right to direct how their children are raised, whether that's about education or their entire upbringing.
This quote from way back in 1925, wow, it really nails the core idea we need to keep in our heads. The court is basically saying that children don't belong to the government, they belong to their families. The state doesn't just get to step in because a judge thinks they have a better idea.
Okay, so with that legal backdrop set, let's see how this huge constitutional principle got tested in the real world. Let's meet the family whose personal tragedy ended up forcing this question all the way to the highest court in the land.
So here are the key players, and at the heart of this story is a tragedy. The girl's father, Brad Troxell, took his own life. After he died, his parents, the grandparents, kept seeing the kids, which was great. But down the line, the mother, Tommy Granville, decided she wanted to scale back that visitation, and that's where the conflict really began.
And this chart really shows you the gap. Now, it's super important to notice that Tommy Granville was not trying to cut the grandparents out completely. Not at all. She was still offering monthly visits, holiday time, but what the grandparents wanted was a lot more than what she, as the girl's mom, thought was best.
Now, normally a disagreement like this would stay within the family, but in Washington state there was this very unusual and very powerful law on the books that allowed the grandparents to take this private dispute right into a courtroom and ask a judge to overrule the mother.
And just listen to the wording of this law. Any person, at any time. Let that sink in. Literally anyone, a neighbor, a friend, anyone, could sue for visitation. And the only thing a judge had to go on was their own personal idea of what was in the best interest of the child. That's it.
And this description from Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, it's perfect. Breathtakingly broad, because that's exactly what it was. This law gave judges in Washington an incredible amount of power to step into a family's life and substitute their own judgment for a parent's.
So you've got this fundamental constitutional right of a parent on one side and this breathtakingly broad state law on the other. What happens when they collide at the Supreme Court?
Well, the final vote was 6-3. The court sided with the mother, Tommy Granville. But don't let that simple number fool you. The justices were deeply, deeply divided on why she should win. And it's in all those different opinions that you find the real story of this case.
So Justice O'Connor wrote the main opinion. It's called a plurality, not quite a majority, and her logic was pretty straightforward. 1. Everyone agreed Tommy Granville was a good, fit mom. 2. The law presumes that a fit parent knows what's best for their own kid. The huge problem here was that the trial court gave absolutely no special weight to her decision as the parent.
And this quote from the original trial judge, this is basically the smoking gun. The judge wasn't saying Granville was a bad mom. He didn't find that her decision was harming the children. He basically just said, you know, when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and it worked for me, so maybe it'll work for you too. The Supreme Court said, nope, that is not how the Constitution works.
Okay, this is a really critical point to understand. The court was very careful here. Their decision was narrow. They didn't strike down every grandparent visitation law in the country. And they specifically avoided creating a new universal rule, like saying a state must always prove a child is being harmed. They were focused only on the problems with this one law as it was used against this one family.
All right,
So let's pull the camera back out now. What does this complicated, fractured decision actually mean for family law today? What's the lasting legacy?
This table does a great job showing just how split the court really was. You had justices all over the place. Some, like Justice Thomas, thought parental rights deserved the absolute highest level of legal protection. Then you had dissenters like Justice Stevens, who worried more about the child's relationships. And even Justice Scalia, who basically said this isn't a constitutional issue at all and the court should stay out of it. It's a fascinating look at just how complex this issue is.
So when it's all said and done, what's the big takeaway? Troxell absolutely cements this idea that fit parents have a fundamental right to raise their kids, and courts have to give special weight to their decisions. A judge can't just step in because they disagree. But, and this is the key, the case leaves us with this ongoing tension between a parent's rights and a child's important relationships. It reinforces the right, but it doesn't give us an easy answer for that balancing act.
Ultimately, the Troxell decision gave a critical answer to one family and set a major precedent. But it left this huge, profound question for all of us, for courts, for lawmakers, and for families to keep navigating every single day.